Okay, so welcome everybody to our first town hall meeting. And so from our EDI side, there are Dwayne Costa here, Colin Smith, Corinna Grease, and Margaret O'Brien, and Kristin, I see, Kristin Vanderbilt. And we would like to answer your questions after giving a brief overview of what we have done recently. And on one hand, to improve just our communication and also to understand your data management needs better and to fine-tune our services accordingly. And so first, we begin with giving you a brief overview of what we are doing and more specifically what we have done during the past couple or 3 months or so. And I will be sharing my screen. Can you all see this? Yeah, okay. So most of you know that EDI runs a state-of-the-art data repository, and its interface supports data submission, data search, and retrieval. And it's based on the PASTA software. And of course, there needs to be a hardware environment. So we are maintaining all this. And then we have quite a bit, part of our work is data curation support. And that has the overall goal to change the data sharing culture and accelerate the data curation workflow. And also we make quite an effort to improving data findability and reusability. And this slide, I don't go in all the details, but it lists our data curation support efforts. And those, let me get the pointer here. Those includes community outreach, which means that we provide a newsletter, a website, are present at social media to promote the awareness of data publishing. And we also try to be present at conferences with help booths, data-themed sessions, and by providing workshops. And Colin will talk very briefly about our recent efforts at conferences and meetings. We also try to support the harmonization of science data to improve the fitness of use. And we work with our advisory board to improve our data curation and overall performance. So then we provide educational webinars as this one, targeted workshops. We have a fellowship program, and we provide training resources on our webpage. And in addition to all of this, there are quite a few support services and tools available, like a consultation hotline where you can contact us, and as soon as possible, as fast as possible, we help you with your data management needs. We have a data curation team that helps you with your data curation and publishing, which means if you don't do it yourself, generate metadata for you. We help you with your data cleaning needs. And of course, we maintain the repository itself. And all these services are available for ecological researchers, ecologists, or data managers from the wider ecological research community, but we especially provide support for some NSF-funded projects, as you see here, like LTRR, LTRAP, MSB, and OBFS. So with this, I go to the next slide, and Dwayne will talk about our technical activities during the past months.
Thanks, Suzanne. Well, this is a short summary of recent technical activities at EDI, and I'll move through this list quickly because, as Suzanne alluded to, we're here today primarily to hear from you. EDI now supports the sitemaps.org and schema.org metadata protocols to enhance search engine optimization of the large catalog of metadata and data resources accessible through the EDI data portal. On the EDI website, we have both a technical news blog post and a YouTube webinar provided by Mark Sevilla that I'd like to point you to for additional details pertaining to this topic. Next, POS2+ metadata. So once you're ready to begin working with EML 2.2.0, you can upload your data packages to POS2+ without any complaints from the system about your choice of EML version. And it will, of course, use the EML 2.2.0 schema to validate your EML. POS2+ continues to accept EML 2.1.0 and EML 2.1.1 as well. Regarding quality checks, also known as congruence checks, there are currently no EML 2.2.0 specific congruence checks in POS2+, but an enhancement has been completed in the congruence checker engine that allows us to mark a particular congruence check as EML version specific. With the forthcoming release of EML 2.2.0, the EML congruence checker working group realized that going forward, we'll need the capability to mark certain checks as pertaining to one version of EML, but not necessarily to another. For example, when a new congruence check is eventually developed for the new EML 2.2.0 project award element, we'll have the capability to mark that check as pertaining to EML 2.2.x, but not to EML 2.1.x, where the award element doesn't exist, because of course it would be inappropriate to issue a warning to someone uploading EML 2.1.x that their metadata is missing the project award element, when in fact that element doesn't exist in the EML 2.1.x schema. Also related to the EML congruence checker, the congruence check that looks at the date-time format string documented in your EML data table date-time attribute and determines whether it's in a preferred set of ISO 8601 format strings, has been extended to include time-only format strings. Originally, the EML congruence checker working group thought that all date-time attributes should include a date. But we heard from our user community, and the case was made that this is not always feasible, and that a metadata provider who documents a time-only attribute, such as HH:MM:SS, should not get a warning from the congruence checker as long as they're using an ISO 8601 time-only format. We've made improvements in POS2+ to the logic used for detecting and auditing web crawler robot access to POS2+ metadata and data resources. For some time now, we've been using the official list of user agents that are regarded as robots or spiders by Project Counter, which takes the form of a long list of regular expressions that we test the HTTP user agent field against. But we're now able to apply that Project Counter list to user agents accessing both data portal and POS2+ web services, whereas previously we were testing only against the web services entry points. When we detect a web crawler robot, we now record that user agent as part of the audit record for that metadata or data access. So over time, we'll have a growing database of robot user agents that may provide us insight into which robots are hitting our system the hardest and when. And this segues into the next item, which is that the EDI data portal landing page for a data package now displays the number of metadata views as well as data downloads recorded for each of the individual data objects in the data package. And the number displays filters out any of the detected web crawler, robot, or spider accesses from that count. And so we believe the number of views and downloads displayed is a more realistic gauge of real user accesses to those resources. And finally, EDI recently completed a formal engagement with the Trusted CI organization, which took the form of a several-month-long series of weekly meetings focused on identity and access management issues in Pasta Plus software. The outcome of the engagement is a detailed report provided by Trusted CI to EDI that will serve as a valuable resource in guiding EDI toward the next generation design and implementation of the identity management component in Pasta Plus. The good people at Trusted CI wrote a nice blog post about the engagement, which is accessible at their website. That covers our recent technical activities. I'll turn it over to Colin for a review of EDI data curation activities. Colin?
Coming through. I get a verbal reply.
You sound a little soft, Colin.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try and speak up. How about that? Is that any better?
Mm-hmm.
Better.
It is.
Okay, great. Sorry for the technical difficulty here. So I'm going to be giving an overview of the data curation activities for the last couple months here at EDI. So we've been participating in a series of meetings during this time, notably the Organization of Biological Field Stations annual meeting. We conducted a data management planning training day there, presented a series of posters, and really had a great opportunity to engage with scientists and technical staff at these field stations to understand their data management challenges and begin strategizing in ways that we can create data management services within that organization, and also, primarily how it is that EDI can meet these folks where they are, and provide the services that they need. At the Ecological Society of America and American Geophysical Union meetings, we had helped organize the Data Help Desk, which is a resource for meeting and conference attendees to learn more about EDI and the services provided. We also presented a series of talks and posters. At the LTER All Scientists meeting, we had provided a series of talks, posters, and sessions, and again, an excellent opportunity to engage with one of our primary client groups to understand what they're challenged with, where they're headed, and again, how EDI can help with these tasks and meet their needs. And then finally, there was the Fair Data Stakeholders meeting back in October, and we participated in that as a stakeholder, as a data repository, to ensure that we are indeed synchronizing our efforts and services with the fair data principles, and also to understand where that project is moving to in the future and how to best align and support it. We continue supporting new and existing clients, onboarding new folks with data curation best practices, metadata generation tools, and how to interact with the data repository. I'd say approximately about half of the new data contributors that we see are associated with publications going into press, but we're getting a good steady stream of data providers that are looking to set up their own workflows and publish to EDI on a regular basis. Harmonization, data harmonization. So that is the effort that EDI undertakes to improve interoperability of data, both within the EDI repository and also with EDI and external organizations or projects like NEON. So our primary harmonization effort is work on ecological community data. We have this EcoCom data pattern project, which we continue to work on as we have time, both developing, fine-tuning the data pattern at this point. We really have a good pattern to work within, and now there's just a few little, fringe edge cases that we kind of work through and understand how to incorporate into this data pattern. So we continue work on that, and we're just starting up now a similar effort for meteorological and hydrological data. And so I believe we're going to be having a workshop early this spring to understand these data types better and develop a pattern for these. One thing I'd like to mention about the EcoCom work in the data harmonization is that we have recently been able to interoperate better with NEON data. So Eric Sokol over at NEON has been working closely with us to convert NEON data products into the EcoCom format. And then on our side, we've been working on aggregation scripts to combine both EDI data that's in the EcoCom format as well as NEON data that's in this format. And so that's really exciting, being able to interoperate between the huge data holdings of the LTER network and NEON and facilitate synthesis science there. So that's definitely noteworthy. The Information Management Code Registry, that's a resource, community resource we've been working on for the last year or so, and it is a place you can go to find software supporting basically all phases of the data life cycle, except for analysis and article writing. It's everything from data ingestion through QC to metadata generation and formatting and so forth. So encourage you to check that out if you're looking for solutions to your data management challenges. It's open for business. We developed an approach and implemented it according to community recommendations, and it is open for business, supported by a controlled vocabulary. And yes, next slide. So our libraries, in addition, one aspect of the data curation effort is to, or one goal here at EDI is to simplify that curation and archive process. And so in working with clients, the data curation team identifies functionality that would be nice to have to help expedite those processes. And there, EDI has a series of R libraries in our GitHub that we add to as this new functionality comes online. In the last couple months, the data cleaner package has come online, and really the noteworthy features of that data package right now are functions supporting the ISO 8601 date times. So there, I believe, are 3 functions: one to convert date time strings into the ISO 8601 format, to detect what the format specifier is. If you supply a set of ISO 8601 compliant date times, it'll return the correct format specifier. And then the third function in there is to read ISO 8601 date times into POSIX format in the R environment. So check those out. They're working pretty well, and they support all the valid representations of ISO 8601 date times, specifically date time resolution. The Taxonomy Cleaner package is a package to help clean up your taxonomy data, primarily to help you resolve a list of taxa to authority systems, and that supports both resolving scientific names as well as common names to authorities. And then newly added is a feature to create the full taxonomic EML tree that could be added to your metadata, which improves data discoverability. And finally, there's the EDI utils package, which has come online in the last 3 months. And this package is to support primarily API calls to the EDI data repository. Right now, we're supporting the reserve data package ID, package evaluate, package create, and package update functionality. But beyond the API, there are also a series of helper functions that support the other EDI-R libraries. So you'll find, I think, a function in there to detect end-of-line characters and to detect field delimiters and all that those sorts of things. So yeah, stop by the EDI GitHub and check those out. And that kind of wraps up what the data curation team has been up to in the last few months. So yeah, thank you very much. And I think at this point, we're going to open it up to questions and suggestions and just kind of general dialogue with folks to see, see what you're interested in, or maybe ask more about what we've presented on today. So.
Hi, this is Hap Garrett with the Plum Island LTER. And the question I have would be related to the status of the EML 2.2 and project funding areas where the information that we need to start putting in there. And I wasn't sure, EML 2.2 is ready to go. PASA can read it, but yet are those fields, and is there a mechanism now to actually put in project funding?
Yeah, good question. I think the release is forthcoming. The announcement, it's been any day now, but it's been that way for a while. And I think you can start using the new elements, such as the new award element under project. However, we're going to need some time to actually do things like rendering that when we do an HTML rendering of an EML 2.2.0 document. So we can validate it. We can validate it in accordance with the schema. But when we display it in HTML, you may just not see the award element there. And then in the area of quality checks or congruence checks, that will take some time to bring those EML 2.2.0 specific congruence checks online as well, because there's a fair amount of development effort there. So at this point, we're just ready to accept EML 2.2.0, but you may not see it fully rendered, and you won't see any specific quality checks. So I think it is going to be an evolutionary process before we get to where we want to be with EML 2.2.0. Does that answer your question, Hap?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I mean, basically we could start and get it in the system. Whether we'd actually be able to visualize and see it there is going to be down the road, but at least it would be in the XML, EML aspect of things that would be available online.
That's right.
Yeah,
yeah, you would see the document rendered, but maybe not all of its elements. And I think Margaret has something to add too.
Okay.
I just wanted to say there is not an official date yet for the release of EML 2.2, although it won't take much longer, and I know you've been saying that actually for quite a while. Structurally, the changes to EML 2.2 have been stable for quite a while, about 4 or 5 months, or maybe longer than that. But right now, the activity that's going on right now is to upgrade the documentation that goes along with it, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The older documentation was built mainly as HTML documents that were converted from the schema documentation itself. All of that's moving into Markdown, so it'll be a Markdown website instead of, excuse me, an independently supported website. The other, and the schema element documentation itself, we're actually generating, excuse me, with Oxygen tools. So if you've used the documentation that Oxygen provides at all, this will look really familiar to you. There's a few little glitches in getting those things to merge together. And so that's kind of where we are right now. You can go to, EML is administered by NCs. So if you go to the NCs GitHub and look for EML, you can see everything that's going on right there. The branch is called 2.2. And I think that then the next thing is that once there's a release, and as Dwayne said, that the repositories need to be able to accept it. EDI already can. Not sure about the others. I'm not sure what Data One's plan is for how they're going to start working with, whether we'll be able to put it into the member node right away or not. One more thing on the documentation. Since some of the more complex things that are being added to EML are things like annotation with external resources, like ontology, one of the things that's being created is a primer. And we're actually going to be looking for a few kind of advanced reviewers, or people who are willing to read the review or read the primer and comment on whether it makes sense from your point of view as data manager. So if anybody wants to volunteer for that kind of stuff, raise your hand somewhere in this system, or just send an email or put your name on the Git somewhere in there to make it known that you're willing to do that. Jason
has a related question. Are there plans for updated best practices to go with EML 2.2?
Yes. Well, probably EDI. I think one of the things we're thinking we should do fairly soon is reinstate, or not reinstate, start a new best practices working group, because there's a few significant changes, and some of them are actually rather complex. Some of the more interesting ones, there's this whole idea of using it as a data paper. That's a much bigger community than just EDI. In fact, the annotations, especially from EDI's point of view, how annotations go in is actually is a rather complicated, I won't say complicated, complex topic. And then any other general changes that it's time for could be in there too. So that's another one to keep an eye out for, that there'll probably be a call for a working group soon after the release.
Would anyone else like to chime in?
Any other questions?
Called a pregnant pause.
Just good stuff. If I saw problems, I'd have something to comment about, but that's all looking good.
So this is Hap again, just general sort of, I guess, curiosity about how things have been going with your various different workshops and training sessions, and people giving you feedback after that, and the ability of others that aren't sort of straightforward IMs like some of us are with LTR, and their ability to get data in through the EDI portal with your help. How is that all going? And I don't know if necessarily you need numbers, but I'm just kind of curious about the sort of reception that the community is having with you all.
Margaret, you're muted.
Actually, I was hoping Karina would answer that one. She's had more general experience with new clients than me.
Sure, I can. I think there were a few really successful approaches. So Colin went to Virginia Tech to work with one whole group there, and all the students got together and wrote their own EMLs, and then we're ready to submit. And so that approach was really good and successful, and I think we have gotten follow-up submissions after that. I'm doing a lot of these people who come with their data set who want to get them in really fast because they have a paper coming out in 2 days and really need a DOI. So I do a lot of those for them, and our workflow is that we send them our metadata template, they fill it out, and we turn it into EML, which with all these nice tools that Colin has developed really is pretty quick by now. So the simpler ones, I think I can turn around within a couple hours by now. So that's very successful. Then there are these fellows that have gone through our program, and Gabriel is one of them. He's here. He could talk himself. He is now employed as a data manager, right? And we will be hiring one of the fellows here to help us with the Ecocom DP conversions too. So we are starting to develop a community that really will provide a lot of resources to everybody else. Gabriel, you want to say something?
One more thing before Gabriel is talking, and Arne was hired by Tim's group. So 3 of our fellows are actually employed now through LTER or OBFS, or EDI actually. So now you can talk, Gabriel. So.
Hello. So I'm at Archbold Biological Station today, actually, but yeah, so I'm currently employed at Archbold and now Florida International University as well. And what I've been doing at Archbold has been mostly a continuation of what I did as an EDI fellow. I've been working with them on their excuse me, their plant demography data, getting that cleaned up and into a standardized format, as well as working with their metadata and uploading these data packages to the EDI portal. I've also been working with them to clean up hydrology data and get that in a better shape to eventually do the same. And then at Florida International University, I'm now working for Dr. Evelyn Geiser's lab. I'm in the process of setting up a database schema to migrate a number of their Excel flat files into a relational database. And so I'm basically, officially I'm I think the position title for that is Assistant Information Manager, but I'm basically starting off as Information Manager for her lab. So it's the fellowship really kicked things off and offered a great opportunity to move into this field and to start off working on this side of the research data. Thank you.
One thing I'd like to add to what Corinna said about the model that we support by traveling to a research group or site and doing a training there is that one, we get people that we know are invested in, are interested in our services and learning it and implementing it for their research organization and their site and what have you. Another thing is that while we're there, we can leverage that opportunity to engage with others in that locale that may be interested in data curation services. So we, we'll give a talk or two or meet with some other groups kind of on the side. So that's been successful, as Corinna mentioned. And another thing that we're beginning to consider are kind of online workshops. So being able to scale our curation services and training out to a larger group, we're kind of toying around with the idea of how best to implement some like sort of online training that we could do in a distributed fashion. So that's all else I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I guess the other thing I was curious about was with in the last few years, I don't know exactly when NSF sort of implemented this, but was that new research proposals, grants had to have a data management plan. And then along with that was like, where is your data going to be, archived and whatnot? Have you found that you've been getting a fair amount of groups, people coming in through that door, similar to, when you're publishing a paper and they want to know where the data is and have a DOI for it?
I think that probably would be where I would end, and that is, no, we're not getting overwhelmed by people who are eager to submit their data. So I think we still have quite a few capacities to expand there. So we really are more engaged right now in being out there, being at these meetings, doing these data help desks, organizing sessions, and still trying to find a way into the more science. So really, like, organizing sessions where scientists will come and still listen to data issues. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious because, people are putting coming to you to get their data archived or DOI because the publicate the whoever's printing it says we demand that. So right. I was curious along the same vein that NSF is demanding that there's the data management plan. The data has to be somewhere. I would have thought that would have been a sort of a natural extension, but then maybe not enough time has gone by yet for that to really be a major forcing function.
Yeah. So I think what NSF has implemented is that when somebody says that they have done certain things in the prior support, then they want to see DOIs for data sets, and that may not have trickled through the system yet. So it is in the future proposal cycles that NSF is actually asking for DOIs for data outside of LTR. So no, we have not seen a major uptick in that. So I think the major implementation came through the journals that are now requiring a DOI.
But Corinna, I would like to add that we see slowly a cultural change, especially in the OBFS group, where we had supported some sites through the fellows, and other sites see how that actually hugely improves the visibility and the value of their data if they are online and available for other groups, and abilities of the sites to collaborate, having their data ready for collaboration. So I think even though we might not be flooded by sites asking to improve their data management capabilities, but you see a request to us, directed towards us, to help with that. So I think we see that. Would you agree, Corinna?
Yes, we do see it, but so we're not data managers for any other site, and all the data managers that are here probably know that being a data manager is so much more than just submitting data to EDI, to the repository. And that very last step is all we're offering to sites to do. So there is still a fair amount of work that the scientists need to put in before data can be submitted by us, even though we do take it the last mile, but it's only the last mile.
Tim entered a question into the chat window. How's LTER core metabase coming along?
So I think that's a question for me. Thank you, Tim. And you'll be happy to hear it actually has migrated back to the top of my stack of to-do stuff. I actually think of that as an LTER project, not as an EDI project, but we can still talk about it here, mainly because it was within LTER, and at least as far as there's a range of tools that are in use at LTER sites, and EDI really hasn't established a policy of picking up any one of those and promoting it, but an LTER site can. And since I also wear an SBC LTER hat, I'm wearing that one when I work on that stuff. And as you probably have figured out, anytime you have some local bit of software that you discover might be useful and people want to see it migrate to some broader group, the process of actually doing that is complicated. And it's more complicated than you think it is when you first start. Right now, the little odds and ends of things that I have to clean up have to do with having the SQL code actually have stable or regular permission settings, so that if I'm to give you some SQL code, you can easily substitute your own local account names for the ones that are in the template. It's really more of a template than it is code you would install, because you're not going to have a user called mob in your account, in your system, who's happens to be the name of the admin on this database. So there's a lot of things like that I'm still working out. But it shouldn't be too long, actually. Once, like I said, once this other stuff was out of my way, now I can actually spend time on that. Colin, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was hoping, Margaret, you could just actually remind me and maybe some other folks here that are not familiar with Metabase what that is and why it may be useful to folks in general.
Sure. There is, so a handful of LTER sites are using a SQL model that originated at the Georgia Coastal System in SQL Server. And here in Santa Barbara, 2 of our groups ported that model to Postgres and have been using the same code to export EML. So it's a relatively general data model, metadata model. That's why it's called Metabase. So it's capable of serving EML, but also some of the other sort of basic kinds of data bits or things that an LTER site would keep track of, like personnel and their addresses, or it has a module for actually managing packages, data packages. But exporting EML is one of the prime functions of it. So the new sites that are coming on, and very cleverly of them, they looked around to see what other sites were already using to find something like a system or components of a system that were easily adoptable. And Metabase bubbled up as something that they thought would be relatively straightforward to establish. There are export scripts written for it in R and also in Perl. And what I've been doing but there's also, even with 3 or 4 groups using it, as it turns out, there were 3 or 4 customizations. So my part has been to strip off some of the added on bits and prune it down to something that could be considered core, and then put it in but it's SQL, which doesn't always play well with repositories like Git. So figuring out what actually should be in a Git repository and then making it easy for somebody else to pick it up, install it, and use it. So cool. Is that enough? We could have a whole webinar just on that, but I'm not quite up to date on it right now, so this probably isn't a good time to do it. I'll say the wrong thing, I'm sure.
Thanks, Margaret.
So I guess one question I have got along those lines, have you worked on more of that interface format, the standardized database output?
Not really. It's just been kind of in the back of my mind. It's like, this is this really cool thing. I really want to play with that, but I got to get this other stuff out of the way first. We were thinking that one of the things we've noticed by looking across groups like LTER is that, and in EML, is that even though you might have a very different core models behind the scenes, there is a point where you could actually expose a lot of that metadata in the same database view, or database view is probably the most common. And if you use a group of database views in order to expose or in order to collate metadata, then we can actually use, you can use somebody else's R scripts much more easily. But actually defining what those, what the specification for sets of view is another one of our projects. And that's more, that is an EGI project because it looks at a broad range and at a much more abstract level than the code itself behind the scenes. I don't even think we have a Git repo for that yet. I think it's that abstract at the moment. I think there's a few Google Docs of notes, and that's all.
Are there any other questions for EDI for us? So if not, then thank you very much for being here and joining us in this first town hall meeting. We might repeat this maybe quarterly. And I also want to mention that there is a webinar by Colin and Margaret next week on the harmonization of community data on the EcoCon DP. So please join us next week at the same time. Okay, then we conclude this webinar and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.